Hi.
Hey,
Hi.
Lori.
Hi. Welcome to All Things Relationships. I am Kelly Miller, and I'm so excited. Before I introduce our guest today, just a quick reminder, if you have any questions at all, you are free to put your questions in the chat box. It can be about the topic we're discussing. It can be about last week's show, just any questions you have, and we'll keep it completely confidential, and that'll pop up and we can get to your questions. Or if you prefer, you can also email allthingsrelationships2@gmail.com, and I will get your questions for next week. A little recap about last week's show. We had Dr. Deborah Mandel. She is a licensed psychologist, and we talked about how to have a healthy relationships. We talked a lot about green flags versus red flags, the letter A versus H, meaning in a relationship, we want to strive to be an H, individuals, bridging in the middle, versus A, depending on each other. And we had a really good discussion. She's very knowledgeable. So if you missed that show, it is available. And on to today. Today's topic is siblings and how to have a better relationship. So we have the best guest on today for this. She is one of my favorite clinicians. Her name is Jeannette York. I'm going to go ahead and read her bio so you get an idea. Jeannette York is a renowned couples counselor, a licensed marriage and family therapist, an author based in Burbank, California. For close to 2 decades, Jeannette has been challenging her patients to put the work in to build the kinds of relationships they desire. Jeannette's career began with mental health training in Minnesota, where she worked with adults who were sexually abused as children. She then moved into hospice care, sharing insights and comfort for those facing the end of their lives. In 2006, she moved to Southern California Counseling Center to work with a wide range of individuals and diagnoses. 3 years later, she opened her private practice in Toluca Lake, where she focuses on couple and family relationships. Welcome, Jeannette. We're so happy to have you.
Kelly. I'm excited to be here.
This is wonderful. I know that siblings, this topic is really close to your heart, and maybe you just want to touch a little bit about why you find this topic and why you like working with siblings so much.
So in psychology, the focus has often been on the parents and on the caregivers of a child. And even Freud only mentioned siblings 5 times in all of his writings. But the truth is that siblings impact us. Our birth order impacts us, and our siblings are the people that we know the longest in our lives. And I think so often in therapy and in psychology, that relationship gets overlooked. And so what I've tried to do is really focus on the adult sibling relationship, not so much children, but adult siblings, and how we can stay connected through our lifespan.
Yeah, I love that. I couldn't agree more. So I guess here's the basic question. Why are sibling relationships so complicated?
Well, a lot of people don't know this, but siblings are more related to one another than they are to their parents. You live with your siblings during the most formative years of your life. And the way parents respond to each sibling as the siblings come along into the family has a big impact on how siblings respond to one another. Sometimes in a healthy family, siblings learn to bond, they learn to support each other, they learn to, the older brother learns to protect the younger sister. That's a healthier relationship, but oftentimes siblings will bond with the parent over a label of the other sibling, so that child is the problem child. And so the other siblings bond with the parents over that label. And also you have to remember that every child that comes into a family is born into a different family. And each child is going to have a different narrative and a different memory of what happened in that family. And it can make for very difficult relationships later in life.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because you hear that quite often. Oh, mom favored you, or right. And each person, their experience is so different. Yeah, I'm sure you hear that quite a bit.
Or that mom saw you as the beauty, or mom saw, or you were
Right.
the athlete, or
Mhm.
you were the one who caused all the problems in the family, or all kinds of things. All kinds of
Mhm.
things that come into play there. And then, of course, later on as adults, there can sometimes be fighting over wills, over
Yeah.
other resources in the family. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
it can create difficult relationships, but you're always connected. You're
Right.
always connected, even if you're
Uh,
not physically connected. You're connected to that sibling. They were with you during your formative years.
So true. What's interesting about labels, because it's so true, we get labeled at a very young age and then it kind of sticks with us. I remember a good friend of mine saying, my sister was the smart one and I was the pretty one. And it's sort of like they were boxed into these categories. And I think even into adulthood, it kind of stuck. Yeah,
Absolutely. And it can
yeah.
impact your relationships later in life too, impact romantic relationships or even relationships with friends later in life,
Mhm.
those labels.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's talk a little bit about how we can have a better relationship with our siblings, because I think that's one thing that a lot of people strive for. So how do we even start?
So I want to piggyback on what we just said, because that translates into how we can have a better relationship. And that is that to remember that your perception of the past may be completely different from that of your sibling, almost as if you grew up in different families. Leave room in your conversations with your siblings to allow for those differences. Memories change over time, and we need to remember that we remember past events through our own filters. The other thing
Mhm.
is to allow your sibling to be the adult they are today, and don't keep labeling them with that child that they were
Right,
30 years ago.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But
and
it's
that's
so
a good thing to do.
that it's so hard because how you remember your sibling is as a kid, right? They were the bully, they were this, they were that. So it's really hard to recognize, oh, wait, they're an adult, they're not in that same setup. But it's like, but is it possible we really do kind of revert back to those roles again, when even as an adult?
Sure, often, like if you go home for Christmas or Thanksgiving or any type of
Right.
holiday,
Right.
oftentimes you get a lot of siblings in a room, even people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and all of a sudden
Right.
they start taking on those old childhood roles and responding
Exactly.
to each other as they did as children.
Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
So I think, yeah, I mean, so I think speaking of what you had said also, it's really like letting go of the past, of your difficult experiences as a kid. And that is really hard. Like if your sibling wasn't kind to you, but is kinder as an adult, it's still, you're still kind of harboring that. So I think that first step is also just going to be letting go of all of that, which is not easy.
It's
Um,
not easy. And I would say if you're the sibling that is being asked to apologize, listen to
mhm,
what you're being asked to do. And if you apologize to your sibling for the way you treated them as a child,
right.
give yourself room to do that and to
Mhm,
understand what their complaint might be. Another way I would say is that look at your sibling as a friend. Yes,
mhm,
they are your brother, they are your sister, but now you get to have them as a friend. So enjoy that. The last
mhm.
thing I'd say is that if you're invited to a wedding, a bar mitzvah, any type of family celebration, family reunion, go, because you're going to create new memories with those siblings, and,
Right.
and happier memories. And if you happy memories create good relationships. So
I
go to
really
go to those milestone events and
Mhm.
whenever possible.
I like that. I never thought about that. You're so right, where you can create all these new positive memories. Yeah. Um, I also think, and I want your opinion, I think it's important to just clear the elephant in the room and talk about, hey, I'd like to have a closer relationship with you. What are your thoughts around that? I think a lot of siblings kind of tiptoe around it. It's like, let's not really talk about it, but I'm of the sort, yeah, let's just talk about it. How can we have a closer relationship?
I agree. I agree. Bring it up. It's always more beneficial to talk about things. Just back to what I said a few minutes ago, when you are talking about it, just remember
Mhm.
that their memories may be very different from your memory.
Sure.
And don't argue about what each of you remember. Just understand that your filter is, if you remember something as a 7-year-old and they remember it as a 10-year-old, that's quite a
Right.
quite a difference between those
Sure.
childhood filters and brains. And so just
Mhm.
allow that to happen. But definitely talk about it. You siblings since you grow up with some of the same experiences and with the same parents, you can bond over that, even if the memories that aren't as pleasant, but just understand that, again, you may have different filters.
Exactly. That's very good advice. Yeah. And then what are your thoughts about tackling those really difficult issues? Like if you have different political views or, or have completely different stances, do you just avoid talking about that and make a deal?
Ooh, that's become a hot topic, and it's become a real issue in families.
Yeah.
What I'd say is, don't argue about it. Try to understand the other person's point of view. Understanding doesn't equal agreement. So you can understand another person, but you don't have to agree with them. You don't have to take on their political view, but you absolutely can try to understand them. And the truth is, I think nowadays I would stay away from political topics if at all possible.
Sure.
They're such a hot button issue, unfortunately, right now.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, and then the last thing too is we take our siblings for granted. And one thing I was thinking as I was doing the outline for the show is verbalizing your appreciation for your sibling, right? It's like, it's always nice to hear we're appreciated and valued. And I think that can go a long way. Just that reminder of, I'm really glad you're in my life. Thank you for always listening to me, whatever it is. I think that's always helpful. And just
I agree in all relationships, and absolutely in sibling relationships. We all want to know we're appreciated and seen for who we are. So absolutely, I agree.
Yeah. So we had a couple questions, but before that, I'd want to hear from you. Are there any other things that you can think of that you'd want to avoid besides the politics or anything else like with our siblings that people shouldn't do?
If there's multiple siblings in the family, say more than two, be careful when the odds are you're going to be closer to one sibling than the other. That's just, the way life is. But be careful that you don't speak badly of the sibling that's not there, or if there's a problem sibling, try not to bond with one of your siblings over the disliking the other sibling. It just creates a very unhealthy family dynamic. So that's what I would say. But when you, again, back to what I said a few minutes ago, if there's opportunities to go to lunches or dinners or kids' birthday parties, go.
Right. Exactly.
It's going to create a better relationship.
You're so right about, I could see two siblings like almost triangulating, like with leaving that one out. So if one sibling starts to badmouth another sibling and somebody wants to stop that, what would be a suggestion about, but not insulting the other sibling where then they feel weird? Is it like, is there a soft way to do it that you suggest?
Let's not talk about, let's just say it's brother. Let's not talk about brother unless he's here.
Exactly. Perfect.
Just like we would any friend. Yeah, let's not do that.
Yeah. I think you're right, though. There is that bond, kind of what you were saying, like you have that bond about your parents, but you also have that bond about the other siblings. So it's very easy to get into that. Can you believe so-and-so? He was so annoying. It's like, it's very easy.
And the narrative, sure. The narrative that you have of the other sibling. Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. So here's another thought, and this is just, off the cuff, but what do you do if two siblings have a completely different narrative about their parents and they're kind of disagreeing on that front, where one feels like the parents were great and supportive and the other feels like, no, they really weren't there for me. And so they're battling because they really feel like, they can't believe each other's perspective. It's almost unheard of because they feel like they were in two different childhoods.
So research shows that parents do have favorites. Now, smart parents never admit to those favorites, but parents do have favorites. And it is possible that one child has a very different experience of their parent than the other one. And so leave room for that. Maybe one child did have a much better experience of their parent and one child didn't, or one child felt very supportive and one child didn't feel as supported. So yeah, again, back to understanding that people have different filters, different memories, and different experiences. And a lot of that has to do with the age at which something happened. But some of it also has to do with, we all have individual experiences of other people, including our parents.
Makes a lot of sense. You know what I tell my kids? I tell my older one he's my favorite, and I tell my younger one he's my favorite. So
Smart, very smart.
so, and then they've caught on and they're like, wait, you've told him? I'm like, yep, exactly. So yeah, that's really funny. That's the easy answer. So, all right, let's take a couple questions from our viewers, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. So this one says, my sister's always jealous of me. It's been this way since we were little kids. We're adults now, but I just feel like she's always trying to one-up me. What can I do?
Okay, so kids, that sibling rivalry, it's amazing how it can continue into adulthood. And just, yeah. Be aware of whether you're playing into that rivalry. You may be a part of it even though you don't realize it. If your sister's competing with you, are you competing with her? That would be a question I would wonder. And remember that your accomplishments are your accomplishments and your sister's accomplishments are her accomplishments. I unless she's embarrassing you or doing it in front of other people, and maybe she is, I don't know. I would say just try to step back from it. That's probably a battle that you're not going to win. But don't play into it either. Just because she's competing with you, you don't have to compete with her.
Right. That's very smart.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also what we talked about, right? Where I'm wondering if the sister who feels jealous, her narrative is my parents favored this child. So she feels the need to constantly compete. So yeah, it's hoping that sister has a little bit of that enlightenment and recognizes, oh, okay, this could be some of my own childhood stuff, but we can only control what we can control. So yeah, it's the other sister not getting into that, which is really wise.
They could be playing into that as well, for sure.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's really sticky. It's a really sticky situation. But I think it is hard not playing into it, but just sort of like accepting, I could imagine that situation where the sister's like always competing. You just have to be like, okay, but I like what you said of like recognizing each other's goals and looking at yourself as a unit, right? Not as individuals, but it's like, okay, we're from the same family. So my goal is a success, and so is yours.
And not comparing yourself. I'm assuming that what this person's talking about is that feeling like their sister compares them unfavorably to whatever their accomplishments are. But again, you don't have to accept that. Your accomplishments are your own, and her accomplishments. And the other thing is, if you really want to have a good relationship with that sister, praise her. Tell her how much. Recognize what she's doing, or whatever it is. And praise her, appreciate her, notice her accomplishments.
Right.
You don't have to compete with her anymore. You're not a little kid.
Exactly. Yeah. Very good. Thank you. Okay. Another question we got was, my brother is an alcoholic, but wants to have a relationship with me. I get so frustrated by his addiction that it's hard for me to have a civil relationship. What do you suggest?
Well, first of all, really be clear about the relationship you want to have with your brother. And then also you're going to need to set boundaries with him and let him know that when he's with you, he can't drink. And be careful that you don't drink around him, because you may be playing into that addiction, whether you realize it or not. Encourage him to get help, but you can't force him to get help. And you can't set a boundary for him to get help either. You can simply ask that he not drink in your presence. It's up to him. You can lead a horse to water. You can't make him drink. The other thing, I would reach out to Al-Anon. It's a great resource for family members who have other family members that are addicted to alcohol or drugs, and reach out to them and see what help they can offer you.
So you're saying, right, so it's not good to say, well, I'll have a relationship with you if you go to rehab or if you get help.
Right. I would say not to do that. That's a demand. It's not really a boundary, but you are free to say, when you're with me, you've got to be sober. Exactly. Absolutely. And also, again, evaluate the relationship. If you are being physically abused, emotionally abused, or financially abused, then you might need to step back from that brother. Absolutely.
Right. Exactly. So we've got a chat here. It says, can you repeat the name of the organization for families? Al-Anon. Yeah. AL-ANON.
Yes.
And it's such a wonderful program. It's a 12-step program that, works with anybody who has somebody dealing with alcoholism. It could be a partner, it could be a mother, it could be a sibling, anybody. But it's a really great organization.
Yeah.
But that's really great advice. The other thing is too, is really understanding alcoholism yourself, so you can get an idea. A lot of people don't really understand that it's a disease. And I think in understanding, there can be more compassion for your sibling around that too, which is something that Al-Anon does, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also knowing that you're not alone.
Right.
Lots of people struggle with this, and Al-Anon helps you, just reminds you you're not alone in this.
Right.
There is help, and there are
Really
resources.
common.
Yeah.
Really common. And then there's also, I was in addiction for many, many years, but there's so many ways it can show up too. You can be a really functional alcoholic, which, you could be, so there's just so many different levels and areas and all of that. So
Right.
Really
You can be an angry alcoholic. You can be a happy alcoholic. You can be the guy who shows up at the party and everybody loves to give them a drink and watch them go. Or you can be that father that comes home from work and starts drinking and starts yelling at his wife and kids. It's just, alcoholism impacts people in different ways, but it's never healthy.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So we have another question. What recommendations do you have for the family dealing with the person who is in denial with their alcoholism? It's a great question.
Oh, that's a tough one. It's hard to get through to somebody who's in denial.
Yeah.
You could stage an intervention where several family members come in and confront them and let them know what they're seeing, what they're observing, what they're seeing, and wanting them to get into treatment. Some of it depends on the age of the person we're talking about. I'm assuming we're talking about an adult.
Right.
If it were a child, I would have a different recommendation, or a teenager, not a child, but a teenager. Again, you can't force someone into treatment, but you can set your own boundaries around that. Exactly. And tell them you love them. You see them doing these unhealthy behaviors, and you worry about them, and you want it to stop for their sake.
I'd say too, if it's really impacting, if they have got children, and it's impacting the children. I'm of the sort of intervention with everybody, talking about how much this is impacting them. There's something about that group level that really speaks to that individual.
Right. In a loving way, but a firm way. I absolutely agree.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And again, you want to be careful that kids aren't getting in the car with this person. Safety has to come first.
Exactly. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. So we got a question here. What if I'm the favorite child, but I can't change that for my sister, and there's a lot of resentment towards me because of it?
Whew, the tough one. Yeah. Again, what kind of relationship do they want with their siblings? Do they want a close relationship? And if they do, they need to acknowledge that, they were treated differently by the parent, and acknowledge how difficult that must have been for the other siblings.
Exactly. I agree with you that that accountability will help, I think, lessen that resentment too.
Right? Just acknowledge. Again, you're all adults now. You get to create your own relationship. And so talk about it. And the resentment's a hard thing. It can last a lifetime. So it's difficult.
It is really hard. Okay. And our final question is, my sister broke my trust 20 years ago. I'm still having a hard time letting it go. She's apologized and since been loyal, but I can't seem to want to have a relationship with her in fear that she'll hurt me again. How do I learn to trust her again?
Well, 20 years is a long time not to forgive somebody. So let me say that. And it makes me wonder what this person learned about forgiveness in their family of origin. So were people who forgive praised, or were they kind of seen as, let's say, smucks or fools? Right. Like, did your mother and father hold grudges, or did they forgive easily? Because I'm wondering if that came into play here. Ask yourself what type of relationship you want with your sister. And also, are you using her betrayal of so many years ago as an excuse to avoid a relationship with her? You know,
That's okay.
do you really want that relationship, or is this an excuse not to be in the relationship? And finally, trust has to be earned, but you did say she apologized. So,
And she's been loyal since. Yeah.
so if you feel it was a heartfelt apology, then give yourself permission to forgive her and to begin a relationship again. It's going to have to come from you.
Exactly.
And I suspect that it wasn't one betrayal, even though that is what you're talking about here. But I wonder what your history with betrayal is, and
Right.
how deep this must have been a very difficult, deep betrayal for you to hold on to it for 20 years. And so honor that, while at the same time give yourself permission to forgive.
And I wonder if it's compounded, like she's had other betrayals and it's like easy to kind of put it all on her sister, kind of maybe,
Mhm.
I don't know, just something like that could be too.
Right. I wonder that too. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of questions around that particular question that I have. So yeah.
Right, right, exactly.
Yeah.
This is so great. So, okay. So Jeannette, can you tell the viewers where they can find you, your website? Yeah.
Well, the website is lacouples.com. And then you can also find me. My office is in Toluca Lake, and you can Google me. And I love to see people in office. It's not that I won't do Zoom. Zoom is great, but I love seeing people in
Yeah.
the office. So
I think it's great. Yeah. I think more people are wanting that experience anyway, which is wonderful.
I think you're right. I think eye-to-eye contact is so important, and being able to observe the full person, and the therapeutic relationship is better achieved when you're in person. Not that it can't be done on Zoom, and a lot of people are doing great work on video chat. So I don't want to take anything away from that. But yeah,
Mhm.
come visit me in my office.
Okay, fantastic. And my social media is my Instagram is at Kelly Miller Therapy. My website is kellymillertherapy.com. And then again, if you have questions, next week's topic is going to be toxic relationships, which is going to be really cool. And so if you have any questions about that, you can send your questions to allthingsrelationships2@gmail.com. And we'll be live again next Tuesday at 10 a.m. And we still have, a few minutes left. If anybody else has questions that they want to put in the chat box for Jeannette or me, you're welcome to ask. And again, it can be about siblings. It can be about we're both therapists. So, oh wait, let's see. Hold on. I'm still trying to figure this out. I see a raised hand. Okay, hold on. Whoever raised their hand, if you can just put it in the chat box, that would be great. Okay, they're saying they're complimenting us, but there's no questions. Yeah, let's see. Jeannette, do you have anything else you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just had a thought about sibling relationships, and just something that I've observed in my practice, because I also see a lot of couples and a lot of families. And it's always interesting to me that oftentimes youngest will marry youngest, and oldest will marry oldest, or middle children will marry middle children, or middle children will sometimes marry younger children. But it's very interesting how birth order comes into play later in life when we choose a spouse or choose a partner. So just kind of a thought that came up for me. So
that's so fascinating. Oh, I love this. I could talk to you about this for days. I love this. Thank you so much. You were such a phenomenal guest, a fantastic clinician, and a dear, dear friend. Thank you so much.
Kelly, this was so fun. Thank you.
Of course. All right. Thank you. I'll see you all next week. Bye-bye. Bye.